Who to know, where to go. My name is Bert Oliva, and today we have the #1 criminal defense attorney in Florida. And he does much more than that. Without further ado, welcome Wilson, Patrick Wilson.
Thanks, Bert.
Hey, how you doing, man?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I just like that James Bond feel for you.
Yeah.
You know? And when I said you're one of the best or the best criminal defense attorney, we've been doing a lot of work with you for a while, and we love the way you handle your clients, the way you communicate, the way that your clients are able to get in touch with you, which is one of the issues we see a lot of times. And you're in a situation, you want to get a hold of your attorney. Patrick, how long have you been doing this?
Coming up on 10 years in April. So I've been a lawyer for about 10 years, and virtually the entire time, like 9 years and change, I did criminal defense or exclusively criminal defense.
And what got you into it?
So I interned for a judge who was a big-time criminal defense attorney in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And then I got to watch the public defenders in his courtroom try a bunch of cases that summer and win pretty much all of them. So it made me want to join the public defender's office and get into criminal defense.
And you loved it.
Yeah, it's been a blast.
One of the things that I know that you love to do and you're extremely good at is jury selection. Why is that?
I think it's the two most important parts of the trial are the jury selection and the jury instructions. And I think if you do it correctly, and assuming it's not just a completely terrible case, but if you do it correctly in most cases, you have a pretty good idea that you're going to win based on the jury that you selected. So I think it's really just the most important part because it's the opportunity that you have to engage with the jury, to communicate with them directly, and just show that you're like an actual like normal human being, you're not just some lawyer.
Yeah, but one of the things is when a lot of people get picked to go to jury, a lot of times they will go ahead and fake some answers and stuff so that way they don't have to stay. You're able to read right through that?
Yeah, and I think part of it is you want to like make it interesting and compelling and something that they want to engage in so that they're not someone who's going to just opt out. So I think there's plenty of people that show up for jury duty, just they absolutely don't want to be on it.
Right.
And then by the time they're done, they feel like it's been a really awesome process.
Right. No, that's awesome. And that's really one of the most important parts, right? Choosing the right jury in order to help your client.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's been times where I've sat down after talking to a jury and then later on picking the jury, and I'm like, I'm pretty confident we're going to win this case just based on who we have on the panel.
And one of the things that I noticed recently we were talking about, it doesn't matter what age.
Yeah, so I've done, the oldest client I've ever represented in my own practice has been 86. It was her first arrest ever. The youngest client I've ever represented was 13, and it was also her first arrest ever. So the thing about the criminal justice system is sometimes you live your whole life or you're just very young and you've never had any trouble, and trouble comes and finds you, and then you end up needing a good lawyer to get you out of it.
What about with someone that's been in trouble several times?
I've done that as well. I've represented guys in repeat offender court, which is a courtroom that's designed for people that have criminal histories or are career criminals. So it doesn't matter. I represented plenty of people on their very first offense in their life. I've represented people that they've been through the system for decades and they just never got the right result or the result they deserved.
Another thing that I would like to ask is, and everybody would like to know is it really important the attorney you choose for your case?
Yeah, it's the single most important thing you can do when you get arrested or get charged with something, because good attorneys can affect the outcome.
Okay.
And a lot of attorneys can get a relatively the same range of outcomes, but a great attorney can get a much better result. So when you're talking about a serious case, a great attorney could take a prison case or a case where it looks like someone's going to prison and either get the charges dismissed or have them found not guilty at trial, or have it pled down to like a misdemeanor or probation. So when you're thinking about going in, you want someone that can change the result.
And how do you choose a good attorney, or just an attorney overall?
I think it's incredibly difficult. I think the best thing you can do is you can talk to someone who's dealt with it before, and if they've had a really good experience with an attorney, that's helpful. I think another thing you want to look at is, what are the results of the attorney, or do they even broadcast the results at all? Like, a lot of lawyers really don't show their work product. I try to be pretty transparent about the results I've had over the years, and it just shows that I'm not someone who's just going to talk a big game. I can actually go into court and I can actually win if I need to in front of a jury.
So how do you actually find out if the attorney has had certain cases? Is it like going through their social media, or is there other ways?
I think you can look at their social media, but when you're like talking to them, I think a question I would ask, like, for example, if I was charged with a drug trafficking case, I would ask that attorney, have you ever tried a drug trafficking case, and what happened? And sometimes you get a little bit of pushback where it's like, well, I've never, just because I got a result in this case doesn't mean I'm going to get a result in your case. And I think the response is, I get that. I'm just asking, and I understand that just because you got that result in that case doesn't mean that's going to happen in mine, but I want to know what happened in that one. And if you don't mind, I'd even take that case number, so that way you can actually look it up online and you can see that their name is next to that case number and that client, and you can see the actual result.
Wow. What about if you're looking at two attorneys, right? Do you look at the cost of the attorney as a way to monitor if it's a good attorney or not? Or don't even look at the numbers? Some attorneys may charge more or less. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, so it's unfortunate. It's not a situation where you can be like, well, I'm paying $100,000.
Right.
I'm getting $100,000 in value.
Okay.
So it's the cost doesn't always end up being what affects the results. Now, there's some excellent attorneys out there that charge extremely high prices for criminal defense cases, and they're really, really good. But there's others that charge big fees, and you might not be getting a particularly much better impact than even if you went with a public defender.
You definitely need to interview the attorney before you just jump on any attorney, right?
You want to interview him, and on a really serious case, you want to vet him too. You want to find out who he's represented before or who knows him in the community. Miami's a big city, but the legal community, especially in criminal defense, is kind of small. It's kind of like a small town feel. So a lot of us know each other. And then a lot of lawyers that are not criminal defense attorneys have practiced at either public defenders or state attorneys, prosecutors, and they'll know the good lawyers, or they'll be able to find out who the good lawyers are.
But you said Miami, but you do the entire state, right?
I do. I try to stay in the South Florida area, but I've tried cases in outside of Miami. I've tried them in Broward. I've tried them in Palm Beach. I've handled cases in Sarasota, in Lee County, in Hillsborough County, in Orange County. Like, for the right case, I'll definitely travel.
Okay. Is it harder that someone in Tallahassee has an incident? You may not have those connections over there that you have here. Does that really matter?
It can, but sometimes you don't want someone that is tied into the community. Sometimes you want someone to just come in and kick the door open and do everything they can to litigate your case without being concerned about how anyone feels about you afterwards.
How soon should you look at getting an attorney? Because most of the time when you get arrested, they do the Miranda rights, and then they'll go ahead and say, well, we'll give you a public defender.
Yeah.
And people will stick with that. Then they'll decide, oh, now I should get an attorney. So when is the best time to really look into getting an attorney?
Right away, because it is a million times easier to get rid of a case before charges are filed, as opposed to when the state attorney actually files formal charges. And I want to break that down a little bit. When you're cuffed and you're arrested and that police officer writes that arrest report or probable cause affidavit or whatever the right term is for what county you're in, that is your arrest. You have not been charged yet. The state attorney's office will make a filing decision on whether or not to charge you with a crime and what crime to charge you with. And if you get a good attorney in earlier, they can impact that result. I'll give an example. I just resolved a case towards the end of last year where the gentleman came to me before he even got arrested.
How did that happen?
Well, he got involved in a pretty serious incident involving a gun and another guy, and he knew that he might be getting arrested.
Okay.
I think police came to his house, came to his mom's house.
There were warnings.
Yeah, they were looking. Yeah, all the signs were there. So he hired me before he got arrested, and I was able to investigate the case before there were even cuffs on him. And when I found out that he actually got arrested, he got picked up at his house at like 2 a.m. I was able to show up at court the next day, argue for a bond. He got charged with a very serious crime, attempted first-degree murder.
Oh, my God.
And by the 30th day after his arrest, those charges were dropped. They never filed any information. And unfortunately, the judge didn't let him out of jail at first appearance, but he got to go home with no criminal case 30 days after getting arrested on attempted first-degree murder. By the way, there was video evidence of that too.
Well, I know that recently you decided to open up your own law firm.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to do that? Most of the times, an attorney at your level would just work for a larger law firm, but obviously there's a reason why you decided to open up yours.
I think what helps me is that the experience is there, maybe not as much as time, because you can only be a lawyer as long as you've been a lawyer,
Right.
but I think distance is what's important. Like I've tried over 80 cases at this point in my career, which is a much larger number than most lawyers at my age and my experience. And I got to a point where I just wanted to be the one who made the ultimate decision on the case other than the client. So I'm very fortunate after leave. I had great bosses at the public defender's office. I had a great boss when I did a very small time in civil litigation. And I worked for one of the best attorneys in Fort Lauderdale after that. But I just got to a point where I wanted to be able to run my own shop, do things my way.
Because there's certain things you want to do that you saw that they weren't doing in these other firms.
Yeah.
Like name a few of those.
One of the things I like to do is I like to keep a pretty tight roster. I don't want to handle too many cases at any given time. I handle around 30 cases or clients, which is not a large number. I have an associate, so there's 2 lawyers working on the cases. But the other thing is that, like, one of the things that I enjoy most is forensic evidence, which is DNA or fingerprints or traffic reconstruction, mathematics, or ballistics, gunshot residue, blood alcohol testing. Those are the things that fascinate me, drug testing. And I like to use what I've learned over the years on the forensic sides to file motions to get great results.
And the forensic side, that's interesting to me. So how did you get that training?
I worked with a guy years ago at the public defender's office named Jared Whaley. He is a fantastic civil litigator in Miami. He was best friends with the guy I interned for, and then I worked with him later, and he was the head of the public defender's office, like forensic unit. So he knew fingerprints really well. He knew DNA really well, and that's what got me interested in it. So I started learning these things, and it's really cool when you're dealing with stuff where people are like, oh, there's no way around it. There's a blood sample. There's a blood alcohol level this high from the blood sample. We can't do anything about it. And it's like, hold on now. And then you can show how completely screwed up the entire process was to get that evidence, and you can get that evidence suppressed or
and
dismissed.
that can be the massive change that you needed for the case.
Yeah, I mean, last year I had a guy who was in jail 5 years. He hadn't been convicted. He was waiting for trial for 5 years, and it was a boating under the influence manslaughter case where the blood. Oh, he was driving a boat, allegedly hit someone else and killed 2 people. So very serious crime. And it was up in Broward County, and they take those charges extremely seriously. And he had a blood alcohol level allegedly of 0.16 based on the blood draw. Now, I knew from my experience and learning about the science that that could just not have possibly been correct. He was walking around on scene normal. He was talking normally. He wasn't slurring his words in the recording with the cops. Yet we had this blood sample that was twice the legal limit. And I was able to look at the evidence, and I was able to figure out precisely where they made the mistakes in drawing the blood, collecting the blood, transporting the blood, testing the blood.
All those things make a difference in the results.
Makes a huge difference.
I had no idea.
It's like anything. It's garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
So that made, in that situation, I was able to hire the right expert, file a motion for bond, get him out of jail after he had been in jail for 5 years waiting, and then
5 years waiting.
5 years.
That's insane.
And in his 30s too. So this was like the prime of his life.
Wow.
He was peaking in his career. He was he is a fantastic carpenter, and he was doing very high end work.
So for 5 years, didn't he have public defenders or other attorneys? Or?
No, he had 3 very well-paid lawyers before I got involved.
And they couldn't do anything.
Well, they just could not get past this issue, and they couldn't get to a point where it was either going to be a good trial case or they could get an offer that's not prison. The entire time during his case, the offer was 18 years and change, 18 years.
Oh, he's already 5 years in, though.
Yeah. Well, he didn't do any time afterwards. He got bonded out. I got the blood excluded because it wasn't reliable evidence. And then shortly after that, they offered him a plea where an offer he couldn't refuse. They offered him probation, and he walked right out the door.
Time served, pretty much.
Yep.
Something to realize here, and I want the viewers to understand that this man had 3 attorneys. And because your specialty is forensic, that's what saved his ass.
Yeah,
it
is what saved his ass.
Right.
Because imagine if you could meet someone on the front end and you could identify that you're going to, with pretty much every other lawyer, you're going to get 18 years or maybe a little less after negotiating. But you're going to do a lot of time in prison, more than 10 years. Or you can hire another guy that's going to get you probation or put you in a position where you're probably going to win the trial.
And this is the only issue he's ever had, right?
He had a couple issues before,
okay.
but it was nothing compared to this. He had some minor run-ins with the law, but he was a successful entrepreneur. He had a very good business. He owned a house on the
one
water.
Mistake just locked him up for 5 years.
Locked him up for 5 years, drained all of his savings, mortgaged up his house. Like that, he got very close to having his life completely ruined. And the thing is that 18 was the bottom he could have got if he lost at trial. There's a guidelines in Florida that absent downward departure or reducing it based on specific reasons, 18 was the minimum he could have got. He could have done, with all the charges combined, over 100 years. I'm not saying he would have got that, but he was not looking at just 18 if he lost.
Yeah, the lowest number was 18.
Yeah, so he didn't do that.
So there's a couple of things I want to bring up. I mean, if you look at you, and I know I said this since the first time I met you.
Yeah.
You look really young. Basically, you're seasoned. You've been doing this for quite some time now. Do you get that every now and then?
All the time.
Right.
Less now than 10 years ago when I looked even younger, but yeah, I mean, I'm gonna look young, and I'm happy about that. I'm gonna look young for a while.
Yeah, at first when you're young, you're not happy about it, but now that you're older, you're like, oh, I'm glad I look
Yeah,
younger.
I'm in my mid-30s now, so I'm like, I'll take it.
Does that help with the jury when they see you this young?
Yeah, I think so. I think it does. I think you just have to lean into who you are. Like jurors, I think they appreciate it when you're genuine. So like I can't be anyone but myself, and I look young. So that's not going to change. And at some point when I'm a old long tooth gray beard lawyer, I'm gonna
beard. What's wrong with a gray beard?
Nothing's wrong with a gray beard. But at some point I'm gonna have it. They're coming in, and I'm gonna I'm gonna own that too. Like there's plenty of material I hear old lawyers give in court that I write it down. I'm like, I'm going to use this in 30 years.
That's awesome. And what about family? I mean, you're obviously busy doing all these cases and everything. Do you actually have a family?
Yep. I have a wife. We've been married for coming up on 7 years, and we have a son. His name is Luca. He's about to turn 2.
Yeah, he's beautiful.
He's awesome.
Well, one of the things the reason I asked that question is because I want them to know that you have not only a successful practice, but you also have a successful family, and all those things come into play, right? Especially for me, if I'm looking for an attorney, I want him to actually have a family, but like not a guy that's been divorced 5 times. Just for me, this is a personal thing, right? And the other thing that also has me thinking is you're in South Florida. What about the clients that speak Spanish?
I speak Spanish as well.
That's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. They reach out to you. You can actually communicate with them. You know?
I speak Spanish. All my staff is Spanish. I'm the only one who's not native Spanish speaking. My associate and my paralegal are both native Spanish speakers. So, that's not a problem down here. It's unexpected,
but it's important though. Yeah. Because you don't look like you speak Spanish, but you speak very well Spanish, and you understand for the most part everything someone's saying. But being in South Florida, that's one of the things that some people may be looking for when they're looking for an attorney. So you covered that. Another check, guys. All these checks are coming in. And then what's one thing, as your final message, what's one thing that you want to educate the people watching or listening on, maybe choosing an attorney or whatever the thing is? Just give them something to get to know a little bit more about Pat.
It's an incredibly important decision. I think you got to find someone that you feel comfortable with. You find it's someone that you feel like you can trust, and I think it's someone that you got to believe they're going to be able to make a difference. Because the reality is a lot of lawyers can come in and they can get especially in good cases, they can get some sort of plea or some sort of program or get a result that many people are happy with. But you want the attorney that when a disaster strikes, when shit hits the fan or whatever it is, you want someone who can step in and handle the situation. And I think that's what I know that's what I'm able to do because
sometimes it doesn't go smooth, right? Sometimes certain things pop up that you weren't expecting, but are you able to handle it? And you're cool, calm, and collective, and you're like, okay, we can go in this direction instead, right?
It used to drive me nuts, but after having done it enough times, when something happens that is like different or new, it's like at this point it's like, great, this is a new challenge to overcome or new problem to solve. So that stuff doesn't really bother me anymore. I've seen a lot of things happen in court, and I know how to handle things when they go sideways.
Because I asked you the final thought, but now I'm thinking I have to throw in a couple more questions. Like, one thing I've noticed with you is that a lot of these clients end up being your friend. Like, there's a connection there after the case. Some of them will come back and give a testimonial. I'm not saying you're going to go out and be friends with all your clients, but I've seen that. How does that happen?
I think it's collaborative for me when I work with my client. Like, I want to have their input because ultimately, and not every lawyer does, but I want to have their input because they were ultimately there when whatever happened. And when it's a team effort like that, and you don't baby the client or belittle the client, but you engage with them and you're like, this is my strategy, this is my material. I'm not concerned about you looking at it because I know my work product's excellent. I want to hear your thoughts on it. In that situation, especially when you're dealing with a real serious case, like a bond forms, and there's a really deep like connection at that point, because especially when you've tried a really serious case, you've been through something, pretty traumatic, way more so for the client than me. But, when you're done with it, like that bond and that connection remains. So, I have clients from back when I was a public defender still call and check in on me and make sure I'm doing okay.
Which means a lot, though.
Yeah.
It means a lot because, at the end of the day, sometimes for the most part, especially in South Florida, you have a client, you stop working with that client. And I'm not just talking about attorneys. I'm talking about in general.
Everywhere,
it's like, that's it. They disconnect. They find another company to work with, and there's no bonding. But that's one of the things that you're really good at. You really care about the case, which is important. Which case is too small or too big for you?
It's never the case. It's the cause, right? So like I have a DUI coming up, but it's like a single mom who's never been in trouble before who got arrested when her 2-year-old was on scene. And like that's something I feel very compelling about, even though a DUI is not the most serious case. I have a big drug trafficking case in the Keys where a young girl got arrested and she's never been in trouble before, and that's compelling to me. So a criminal case is going to be traumatic on someone's life. It's going to potentially ruin someone's life, even if it's relatively minor. I don't mind handling the lowest level of misdemeanors up to homicide and, very, very serious felonies, because it's not the charge, it's the person who's dealing with it.
Are there any cases that you will say no to, or you take them all if they come in?
I handle all criminal defense cases, state, federal. I do appeals. I might reject some because I feel like I have too much on my plate right now. I have too many clients as it is. Or I might reject some because it's in a different part of the state and it's a first DUI. Don't pay what I'm going to charge you to travel there. Okay. Hire someone local. You're likely going to get what you need. So, but I mean,
so if it's a smaller case, you recommend stick within your area for an attorney, but if it's a larger case, this is when they need to call back.
I think when it's a big case, a serious case, you need to find, the right lawyer, and the right lawyer might not necessarily be the lawyer that's next to the courthouse and wherever.
What is the best way to get in touch with Pat?
Call my office, shoot me an email. You can fill out an intake form on my website.
So there's several ways.
Yeah, reach out to me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook.
Now, usually when they reach in and they contact your office, do they eventually get you on the phone?
Every client that I take talks to me first.
Okay.
Because like they're looking for the right lawyer, I'm looking for the right client. I'm not trying. It is a matchmaking process.
Well, Pat, I want to thank you. And one of the reasons we decided to do this show is because we want people to know where to go and who to know. And today I brought you what I believe is the number one attorney in South Florida, or in Florida in that case. So if you guys need an attorney or you know someone that needs one, please don't hesitate to give Patrick Wilson an opportunity to look at your case. So I'm going to leave you with my quote. Live life, don't let life live you. My name is Bert Oliva, Cuban-born, American-made. I'll see you guys real soon.